All states and territories are on track to move to stage 3 of eased restrictions by the end of next month. The National Cabinet today agreed on relaxations which will apply when states and territories decide to move to stage 3. The 100-person cap on indoor gatherings will be removed in favour of the 4 square metre rule. This ensures larger venues will be able to cater for more customers. Stadiums with a capacity of 40,000 or fewer will be allowed to reach 25% capacity. Events will only be allowed if they are ticketed and seated, allowing for physical distancing. The Prime Minister has urged all states and territories to nominate a date for the reopening of their borders, and plans are being made to allow international students to return to Australia. Scott Morrison says they're in the early stages and there is still work to be done. Well, the National Cabinet then has agreed to lift restrictions on indoor gatherings from next month. It's this fast-tracked plan to ease the coronavirus restrictions, and up to 10,000 spectators will be allowed to attend certain sporting and cultural events. Political reporter Jane Norman joins us now from Canberra. Jane, good afternoon to you. This was the National Cabinet. There was lots of things that the Prime Minister announced, but actually nothing changes as of today, isn't it? It's just what will happen.
Yeah, that's right, Lorna. So the state and territory leaders met today with the Prime Minister to map out stage 3 and beyond, and they're actually fast-tracking the plan to ease restrictions. So currently, most states and territories are at stage 2. Stage 3 begins from July, but as we've seen with other coronavirus-related restrictions, the states and territories will move at their own pace. But broadly, the plan that's been set out today goes a lot further than what the National Cabinet agreed to when it first developed this 3-part plan. So as you've mentioned, from July, the 100-person limit on indoor venues like cafes and restaurants will be scrapped. It'll be replaced by that 1 person per 4 square metre rule. So it allows venues to be a bit more flexible depending on how much space they have. And for sporting fans, they can rejoice because they might actually find themselves in a stadium this time next month. The rule on mass gatherings has very much been relaxed, so stadiums that can hold up to 40,000 people are allowed to meet a quarter capacity. So they're allowed to have 10,000 spectators in their stands, provided the events are ticketed and seated. And it's not just sporting events; it's also possibly cultural events. We're not talking music festivals just yet, but there could be concerts too, provided they are seated and ticketed. So this is certainly fast tracking of the 3-part plan that was outlined a little while ago by National Cabinet. But as you say, it's from July, so it's a few weeks yet before these rules might start to be relaxed.
There's been a lot of antagonism, hasn't there, about the state borders, and the Prime Minister wants them all open now. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, the PM has been piling pressure on those states and territories which closed their borders at the height of the COVID crisis or forced travellers to self-isolate. Now, as it stands, it's only the ACT, New South Wales and Victoria that have open borders, but some states are starting to set dates for the reopening. So today, South Australia has nominated July 20. Queensland is moving towards a mid-July reopening. We understand Tasmania is likely to follow suit. Western Australia, though, is standing firm. Mark McGowan, the Premier there, is giving no indication that he's thinking of reopening the borders anytime soon. Today, though, Scott Morrison kind of upped the ante. He actually described plans to start bringing international students back to Australia. Now, we know that international education is a hugely lucrative market. Universities very much rely on foreign students for revenue. And so the Prime Minister today said that there's a pilot plan being worked out to bring some foreign students here, as long as they've had pre-approved travel plans to certain institutions. But he says that is only going to be available for those states that have opened their internal borders. Here's what he had to say.
Can't come to your state from Sydney, then no one's coming to your state from Singapore. And so if you want borders open for international students, then you need to open borders for Australians.
The Prime Minister's been quite vocal today again over protests. There are due to be protests in some cities over the weekend. What's he said?
Yeah, well, he has again said, Lorna, don't go. It is simply not safe in the midst of a pandemic, given that we know the coronavirus, while community transmission is very low, that can change because the virus is so contagious and so infectious. And that is the message that was repeated by the Chief Medical Officer, Brendan Murphy, who said that, in his words, these events are really dangerous because people aren't necessarily exercising social distancing, and you can't exactly immediately contact trace straight afterwards because you don't know all the people that you have just come into contact with. But certainly the whole issue of the Black Lives Matter movement, that is what these protests have largely been about, has filtered through here to Australia. And it's revived calls in some quarters to remove statues of colonial figures, and in particular, Captain James Cook. Now, on that matter, the PM got himself into some hot water yesterday when talking about this push to remove these statues. The Prime Minister's not in favour of it. He very much defended Captain Cook, and he was trying to differentiate him from the figures associated with slavery whose statues have been targeted by activists around the world. And in his defence of Captain Cook and the establishment, the founding of Australia back in 1788, the PM made the comment that there was no slavery. Now, he was talking about that time, but then some have taken that to mean that there has never been any slavery in the 230 or so years since. Today, though, Lorna, he sought to clarify those comments, saying that he didn't mean to cause any kind of offence or hurt, but that he also wasn't interested in re-prosecuting the history wars and the ills of the past. His focus, he says, is on the crisis that we are currently in. And on that front, here's what he had to say.
I'm not interested in the debate about what people want to tear down. I'm interested in what people want to build up. And what we need to build back up are businesses and jobs, and we need to restore livelihoods and lives. Honestly, people, let's focus on what's really happening. 800,000 extra people are on JobSeeker in the last few months. You want to know where my focus is? On them and the businesses that have closed and the livelihoods that have been destroyed.
Prime Minister Scott Morrison there, Lorna, talking about his laser light focus really on the issue of jobs in the context of this broader debate about Australia's history.